Welcome back and forth with Becker and Orr. Lots of fun today. Starting with the leadoff topic, will the bull market continue? What's in store for the second half of the year? We're going to tackle that. Plus, a little bit of seasonality fun, buy in July. We're going to revisit that trading tip. And of course, some lightning round. But Kevin, let's just jump right into it. Since October last year, the markets have really come back, certainly in the US, certainly internationally, not as much in Canada. I'm going to pull it up here, show you two quick charts, and then we can talk second half of the year. This is the US. You can really see the trend there since October, where it kind of bottomed and a significant upswell since then. It's actually above the August highs. That's a clear uptrend for the S&P 500. We flipped to Canada, the TSX, not so much. You had an initial bounce in October and kind of sideways for most of 2023. It is positive, but just a much smaller number than the US. So you can see what's happened 2023 to date, Canada versus the US. US significant outperformance. What's in store for the back half of the year?
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest question, right? I mean, as we saw last year, the American market had a huge drop. The Canadian market didn't. And now we've seen the American markets had a nice, really big bull run. And we haven't seen that in Canada. Again, we've been more range-bound along those lines. Now, again, a lot of this is going to depend on what happens with interest rates, what happens with inflation, what happens with unemployment, all going to dictate where we're going to go. As we know today, the U.S. came out with some really great numbers for employment, which may have a bearing on the inflation figures, And again, that may have a bearing as to where we go, whether it's soft landing or recession. I do think that you're going to continue to see somewhat of a movement up and down probably for the next little while. I don't think that we're directly into that bull market where we're running another 20 or 30% before we have a little bit of a correction here. Canada, again, that's going to be a little bit of a different situation because we've been a little bit less in the way of job growth and everything else along those lines. We're starting to see that decline in the market somewhat, though not really a large portion. So I would say, yeah, we're probably going to get a mixed movement going forward. It may be more sideways, I think, than bull or bear at this point. What do you think?
Yeah, in terms of markets, the best years in the markets historically have always followed some of the worst years in the markets. So it's rare that you get two bad ones in a row. It has happened, in history, but it's usually quite rare. Typically, you see a rebound, right? That has normally been the trend. And so far in 2023, that has been the case, right? You mentioned US had a much worse downturn last year than Canada. Now, lo and behold, US has seen a really big recovery in 2023 and Canada less so, but we had less of a drop in 2022. So unusual when you have a big drop to not see the big rebound the year following. That tends to be the trend, and I think that's repeating. So we're expecting, at least in my view, will it be the strongest performance in the second half? Well, that might be asking a little much to see that kind of growth, certainly out of the US repeated, but I think it would be positive. We're expecting a bigger number. And I was looking at some of the data, and most folks look at the average and say, well, last 20 years, Canadian markets average kind of 6-7%, the US kind of 8-9% per year, but rarely do you actually get the average return.
That's right.
Normally you get either a really big number or a not so great number. So I wouldn't be surprised if we did see a larger number, because it's very rare that you actually get the average number. The stock market, a little more volatile. You tend to see a little more of the extremes. This could be one of those better years, at least in the US, shaping up to be that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably the way we're going to be going. And again, you could, even if you had a sideways market at this point in time, you're still up for the year. And that is better than what you got from last year. And, something flat is better than something negative for a lot of people in that aspect. And you're right, 2 years in a row, kind of hard to do. But after moving from the bull market,
we got to solve the markets, Kevin. We found the secret. We found the secret. We're going to share it with everyone right now. Seasonality, the whole sell in May going away. Forget that. You got to come back to buy in July. We talked about this a few times. I don't know why this is the case, but it's fun to talk about. I have the data here, so I'll explain what's on the screen. You've got the ETF, the QQQ, that's the symbol. So that's the Invesco QQQ Trust, which follows the NASDAQ 100. I downloaded all the data from investing.com, specifically for the 1 month of July from inception until now. You can see it started off not the best, but then 2008 going forward, the month of July in 2008 and every July since has been green 15 years in a row, Kevin.
That's excellent.
15 years in a row. All you had to do is buy beginning of July, sell at the end of July, and you made money in the NASDAQ. I don't know what's going on, but clearly a seasonality trend there. Buy in July.
There is. And again, I mean, we are dealing strictly with the NASDAQ here. So let's remember that this is a tech-heavy index.
The NASDAQ 100 to be specific, the 100 biggest companies in the NASDAQ. So that's your Apples, your Microsoft, your Tesla. That's what's in that company or in that ETF.
and 5 of the biggest companies in the world are all tech, and they're NASDAQ-oriented companies to begin with. So, I mean, if we really take a look at that chart, I mean, the beginning sort of 99 straight through till 2002, we'd had the tech boom that went on, and then the disaster came. All of a sudden, Y2K didn't happen. So nobody was buying tech sort of from 2000 until 2008. Everybody went back to old economy. So you weren't really buying into this NASDAQ market. Those companies weren't as established as they were. After the Great Recession, though, all of a sudden it's a completely different scenario. All these companies are huge. They're making money and everything else. And boom, we're starting to see that it moves. I mean, especially in 2020, even last year, because of the fact that everything was going on, you had those huge tech scenarios going on in July because of the lot drop that they'd had at the beginning of the year. So why July? That's probably the biggest question anywhere. We have no definition for what it is, but it could be lower volume. It could be that, people have gone away. I mean, if we take a look today, I mean, one of the reasons why you might get tech up today is, well, Meta is coming out with Threads. They're competition to Twitter. And if the stock goes up, well, there's another portion for why this is. So new inventions, maybe that's the thing we have to go and look. Is everything new coming out in July from tech? And that's driving the market. But
could be. I don't know why July, that seasonality aspect is quite peculiar. Like, why has July always been positive for the last 15 years? But I understand the tech dominance of the last decade and a half. Really, 08 forward, the companies went from smaller companies just to the world's biggest, most dominant companies. They're all tech. They're all part of this index. So I get that part. The July piece just seems so peculiar. Why the last 15 years in a row has July been the winner or one of the many winners for the Qs there, which is the tech dominated index?
We're going to have to dig a little deeper into this and see if we can come up with a real explanation. But what we do know is if you're going to buy tech, buy at the end of June, and then you can get a July bump, and that's going to really help you.
That's right. Buying July is the new seasonality pattern. There we go. We'll coin it. We'll move on to the lightning round here. We'll have a bit of fun, Kevin. You can. You ready? I've got a whole list of fast and furious questions here coming at you.
Yes. I'll see what I can come up with and see what kind of answers I can doggedly say today. All right.
Okay.
We're ready for the first one.
Start with an oil-based question. So we talked the Canadian market, a little range bound, largely due to oil, or partly due to oil. 2023, do you think oil gets back over $80 a barrel?
Wow, that's always a tough question. But I am going to go actually on the offensive side. I'm going to say yes. I mean, the Saudis and the Russians just came out last week, or actually the beginning of this week, and stated, we are going to maintain these production cuts that are going on. I think they are going to continue to cut and cut and cut, or maintain cuts until they get oil over that $80 barrel scenario that's going on. And again, if the economy starts to pick up any bit over the second quarter, which we hoped it would be, I think you're going to see oil move from there. So yes, I'm going to go with oil over 80 before the end of the year.
Okay, we got to talk hockey. There's the NHL, lots of trades, lots of deals. We'll focus on one here. The Jets deal Dubois to the Kings. Your thoughts? What's happened? Good deal, bad deal?
Actually, you know what? I think based on the parameters, this is an excellent deal for Winnipeg. I mean, you were really backed into a corner. Dubois said, I need to be traded. I'm not going to play here, and I'll give you a list of 5 teams you can send me to. So, I mean, and those small parameters, and to find somebody that's willing to take on the money, I think we did really great getting 3 players that can play on the team this year, as well as a draft pick next year. I think that's excellent return for being boxed into the corner.
There we go. One more market-based question here. Inflation. Hot button issue was soaring last year, and we've seen it come down quite a bit. I mean, in Canada, the CPI, the headline number, was below 4%. On July 18th, we're getting the next report. Did they get below 3% of that report?
Ooh, that stole a question I was going to ask. Anyways, knowing the way this is going to go, you know what? As hard as it is I don't think we're going to get below 3% for the year. I just think that there's too many factors holding us away from that. And again, we had forecasted, I mean, at least originally, what the BOC was saying is if they could get to 3 this year, that's great. They'll get back to that 2% probably mid to end of next year. So I'm going to go that, 3% is probably the barrier, but I think we're probably going to hold there by the end of the year.
Okay, last question here. I got to talk Succession. It ended a little while back. Did you like the ending of Succession? Was that how you thought it'd wrap up?
Well, to put it honestly, I think it wrapped up perfectly, the way it should have. I mean, the kids did this originally, and the way things came out, I didn't see it coming that way. But I got to admit that I really, really was impressed with the way it ended, and I am not upset with what went on. It's not a Sopranos scenario to me where you just fade to black and I don't know what the hell's going on after that.
You got some closure, right? It kind of ended the tap of the whole saga. They actually answered the question of Succession, so it worked for me as well. We'll switch gears here. You can get your questions ready. I'll get prepared. All right, go for it.
Okay, so I'm set. Well, as we know, we've talked about inflation and everything else. Next week, the Bank of Canada has an interest rate decision. Based on everything that's going on, are we going up by a quarter point? Or are we staying flat? Because we're definitely not cutting.
Yeah, they're definitely not cutting. And we have the big jobs report, both Canada and the U.S. on Friday. I think that has some influence. If the U.S. data we saw this morning from the ADP report is any indication, it probably means the job numbers will continue to be strong, which means the Bank of Canada will be forced to bump again. I don't know if they do right away, though. I think they hold this meeting, and they might bump at the next meeting.
Okay, that solves that. You actually mentioned what I'm going to deal with for your next question. We've already had the U.S. numbers come out.
Yeah.
Now, the Canadian number is listed at 20,000 new jobs tomorrow. Are we above or are we below that?
20,000 is actually a big number for Canada to create that many jobs in a month. And there's always some volatility. I think we come in a little below that. We still create lots of jobs, but I'd say we're below expectations, below 20,000 tomorrow with the jobs report.
As a bit of a follow-up, do we get our unemployment rate to go up at all?
Ooh, that's always a secondary question, right? Because different numbers. You can create jobs, and more people participate in the labor markets, unemployment can actually go up. I think it's going to hold steady. It's going to be right where it is now. It's already quite low, near historic lows. It stays there.
Well, we're both movie fans. We like that sort of scenario. As I reported on Global the other day, the 2023 box office has done well compared to 2022. Still not back at 2020 or 2019 levels, but we have a great second slate for the second half of the year. Which movie has a better opening weekend, Barbie or Mission Impossible?
I really hope it's Mission Impossible. Like, just for my own sanity, I really hope Mission Impossible is the big blockbuster of the summer and the biggest movie of the year. I could be wrong. The Super Mario Brothers movie was phenomenal. Maybe Barbie will do the same thing, but I'm really hoping it's Mission Impossible.
Yeah. And in the final question, I'm going to switch gears to a little bit, going back to the sports scenario. I'm going to football this time. The Bombers have been to 3 Grey Cups in a row. Now, whether this team's as strong as the other ones have been, they lost to BC already. They are 3-1. Do the Bombers still win the West Division, or are we not as good as we used to be?
I think it's pretty clear on paper, and at least in the first couple of games, it's not as strong as a team they've had in previous years. But it doesn't mean they can't still win, still be a challenge. I still think they win the West.
Okay, that's perfect. You've answered all my questions for today. No bonus questions that I have, but I think we've done a good job in clarifying some of these options.
And if you want to get a hold of us, if you have questions, chatwithclintonkevin.com, part of our website. Please fill in the form. It comes to us. We'd certainly love to hear from you. Any parting comments, Kevin, for the folks?
Well, based on the fact that the last 3 days, the global warming has happened because we've set the 3 highest temperatures ever in the world. Let's hope that we don't continue this trend going forward, but that we do have a warm summer, and we will be back again soon.
Take care.